Hey,
Hello, my dear despised girl. How are you?
good, and you?
Doing well, considering so many things happening around the world right now.
I know we were just having this amazing call on the feminist mobilization around justice vaccines. It's amazing. So maybe we will have a next and a special guest for this on a future episode because there are so many things happening.
Really, really. Can you tell us a bit?
Yeah, well, you see, it's just that, as you know, at the WTO, governments should be unblocking the access to intellectual property rights so that governments in the global south can not only produce their own vaccines, but also to have access to different parts of technology. So that, for instance, in a hospital, you need a ventilator. So what happens with the
Mm,
tube and what happens, countries on the global south should definitely also have access to that technology. And also, what about medicines, and what about all of the equipment and the gear for the safety of the nurses and people who
right.
are doing the caring? And so far, the developed countries, all of the powerful countries, especially the EU, especially Germany, have been blocking, the TRIPS waiver, which is the intellectual property rights waiver, because there are conditions for normal times, and then there are conditions for emergency times.
Right.
And at the WTO, there is language that says that in times of global emergency, the trips could be waived, meaning that there is going to be like a parenthesis, and then all of the countries should be able to access to patents, to intellectual property rights, etc., so that they can also produce internally what is needed. And so far, the rich countries are saying, no, this is not the time, this is not an emergency. And it's like, what the fuck? Because, the thing is, they're almost fully vaccinated, and it's actually the poorest countries that haven't. Africa only has 7% of the global vaccines, whereas the rich countries are almost headed to 100%. So it's obscene, it's untenable. And then there is a delaying tactic in which now some countries are calling for a pandemic treaty that is going to take like 5 years and perhaps even more. And it's like, no, we don't want a pandemic treaty, we want the language that is already there, because there are provisions for emergencies. This is a global emergency. We need to have access to vaccines, to medicines, to medical technology right now. And it's the rich countries that are doing all the filthy job for the profiteering of the big pharma. And we need to stop that now. I don't know why people isn't talking about this. Hi,
I
Rina.
know.
I'm just
Rachel.
ranting. Just ranting. We started ranting.
Yeah, I was just asking Amelia how her day was.
Okay, and then that's that's how her day was.
Yes.
Passionate
But
as
it's
ever,
true, no?
Miriam. Hi,
Normal
everyone.
rules, well, the World Trade Organization rules are not normal at all because they're not designed with the best interest of people and planet. The WTO rules are designed to serve the interests of rich countries and their corporations. So I don't know what the normal rules are, but definitely pandemic is not normal. And if they're calling for solidarity, if they're calling for international cooperation, then none of those rules should be applied in the first place, right? But I also found out last week that, it's very incredible that just as the EU is blocking, the TRIPS waiver, it is actually not just hoarding vaccines, but also getting exclusive rights from South Africa in the manufacture of Johnson. So they're getting the exclusive rights from South Africa manufacturing their vaccines of Johnson so that it can be exclusively delivered to the EU. It's like
Disgusting.
you already hoarded much of the world's vaccines. You're talking about booster shots, and now you still want to, have an exclusive distribution, control for vaccines that are manufactured outside the EU.
Yeah, and the life in the global north is just back to normal. It's obscene, and the life in the global south is so disturbed. It's like the world came to a halt. What? Why can't they see that that is an emergency? It was an emergency for them. They don't care about anybody else. They come to say that they're the paladins of human rights and the civilized world. They're barbaric. They're really, they're just the lowest of the low in humanity, and they really deserve to be called out. And people in the global north should really, really call them out. I don't know why that is not happening already.
You know, it's really criminal because in this situation, who gets to decide who survives? Who gets to decide who will die? You know, it's totally unjust. So,
Yeah, I
Rina,
mean,
how was your day?
I'm actually, my day is like hectic because I'm coming back to Jakarta. Finally, get out of the quarantine. No, I really want to hear more about this trips wafer because Amelia, Tata said that you're talking about your day. So you're attending meeting or what on this on the trips waiver, yeah. So I just really want to know, like what is actually the rationale of blocking this, right? Like the EU and etc. What did they say? Are they saying that we cannot, produce, or what is actually the rationale? Because they always said that they are so keen on human rights and etc. So I just really want to know what is their, mind and way of thinking.
no, yeah, yeah. It's just that I was telling Ted that we came. I'm just came working from with an alliance of feminist organizations that are working on vaccine access, and actually on, rather than a vaccine, because it's not just vaccine, on the TRIPS waiver, on really liberalizing the access to intellectual property rights for everything related to treating the pandemic. And the argument is obscene. One is that they cannot block competition, because if they block competition, then there's going to be a downfall in the quality. Second, which is this the most obscene, is that developing countries don't have the capacity to produce them. They don't have the capacity. They're just useless, and they are the only ones who can produce them. It's like, let me tell you about the global division of labor and how we've been producing everything for you. And the third one is that, oh well, they should just really reward the private sector that has done all of the work, while they just obliterate the fact that these vaccines were done with public money. And at this time, this is genocide. Is genocide for against the global south. It's not inequality, it's genocide. As Tete was saying, it's criminal. We should start calling it like that, because when we're saying inequality, it doesn't reflect the extent of the impact that it's having. It's that these people are genocides, and we should really just file a lawsuit against them and open up an ad hoc tribunal, like all of the war tribunals. We should really start thinking about doing that. I'm not a lawyer, so sadly I'm quite named at that, but people in the audience, please let us know, what can we do? Yeah, so that's it. My worrisome morning. Rina, you're
Actually,
muted.
yeah. Rina,
Yes. Yes, I think that we should have the a people's tribunal or tribunal on this.
Yes, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
really felt that we have the evidences,
Let's
we
do
have
that.
everything that, and then I think that if we want to actually make like a movements and then gather all the people's movement and then talk about the evidences of the, the trade rules like WTO and etc., we can actually do that, and then we did that actually in WTO in 2005,
hmm, right,
right?
right.
Remember that's right.
Hmm.
So we were
Of
there,
course.
and then there's a people's tribunal against WTO and everything. So we should, I think this is the time.
See,
Yeah.
we brainstormed one idea while we're here. And I think we were talking about, how a lot of exciting things are happening. So Emilia just talked about, this feminist campaigning on the vaccines. But there's also one event happening now, and that is the Global Week of Action for Debt Cancellation. So I think many of us have seen on social media, a lot of organizations are really speaking up and saying that, number one, there should be, unconditional debt cancellation for developing countries. There's also those that I see on social media that says there cannot be climate justice without debt justice. So a lot of the things are being connected. No, a lot of the problems right now are all being attributed to the debt problem. So why? And I think this episode tonight, of course, before we already talked about the debt problem and why it's not just a management issue. You remember that? You spend more than what you earn, that's why you fall into debt. But it goes deeper than that, no? So this part of our episode now will really be devoted to talking about the structural roots of the debt problem, why we say that it's a debt trap and it's a vicious cycle, no, and why debt is in the center of many economic justice struggles. Yeah, so it's really exciting and I can't wait. We have our guest, right?
We have our guest, but I think she hasn't arrived. I mean, she's really a
In
legend,
another meeting.
and she's the leader of the entire global South movement on that, in a real massive manner. There are many, authorities, feminist authorities in the matter. I have three or four to defer to, but Lady Nakpil is one of them. So she's not only an activist, she's really a legend. And that this week is precisely a very crucial week in mobilizing globally. She's one of the strategists around it. So maybe she's just mobilizing people in the street. I wouldn't be surprised. She's like, I'll see you later, and I'll just send you selfies of me taking in the street. So let us wait to see if Lily can join us. But anyway, the campaign of campaigns is also part of this global effort this week in talking about that, in mobilizing around that, in raising awareness about why is it that everybody should care about this. So I think we have enough content on our own, and hopefully Lily can come and tell us what is it, the exciting things that are happening around the world. But if not, let us just crash the internet this week with all of content on that, and people in the audience, follow us please, and also share and retweet and share your experiences on your countries about that.
Just to talk about Lady, okay? Because I know Lady. Okay,
Yes.
I'm just going to talk about Lady now a little bit because I joined a feminist organization back in Indonesia, start from 2006, and immediately I know Lady from that. When I was in Solidaritas Perempuan in Indonesia from the Anti-Debt Coalition, and then also Freedom from Debt Coalition, and then all this Asia Pacific movement on debt and development. It's amazing. And then we actually, a lot of things that we are doing, like we make a position paper, we actually talk to government, but most of it is also campaigning. And then I just remember having a discussion with Lady about the connection between the climate justice issue with debt justice, right? And then we even have a chant, like, hey, it's hot in here, there's too much carbon in the atmosphere, pay up, pay up, pay up your climate debt, pay up, pay up, pay up your climate debt. That's amazing. Just try to remember. Yeah, anyway, do
I
you have
love it.
any debt campaigning experience? that
Yeah, my experience at debt campaigning was way, way back when I was still in college, no? Because the Philippines has just come from, the dictatorship. And then there was a huge foreign debt that he left. No, so people were campaigning against paying all of these dictator debts that did not really benefit the people. For instance, the nuclear power plant that was built on an earthquake fault line that was never operated, but still we're servicing the debts until now. No, but those are the my earliest recollections of debt campaigning. But throughout, and especially now, my gosh, the Philippines has just been classified as one of the world's biggest debtors. No, because our government has been saying that we need to take out loans for the pandemic response. But it's not true. They're using the money not to buy vaccines or help the people for social protection, but for corruption, for intelligence, for military. So, all of that in the name of pandemic response. And that makes the Philippines the world's biggest debtor at the moment.
Wow, there are so many things that are coming to mind. Just firstly, is precisely that there is the need, as we were saying last session, on either raising your revenues or getting a loan. And raising the revenues now with all of the Pandora Papers that came out a couple of weeks ago is precisely the proper path, because there are all these wealthy people and all of the global corporations, especially from the global north, who are draining all of the money from our countries. And there are millions of dollars flowing out every day, whilst our governments are judged if they don't get a loan, and they get loans with higher interest rates, because of course we are a risk for the lenders, because it's like, oh, but you're so poor, so if I give you money, then you're gonna die out of the pandemic or climate change or whatever, so then maybe you won't pay me, so I have to give you higher interest rates. So and then we go into this loop in which the lenders on the one hand profit from the poverty and the conditions of those who don't have any means. They bring in conditionalities forcing our countries to spend the debt, the loan, on the corporations, on the private sector, on those sectors that are really nothing to do with the well-being of the people. And then they're also, while the private sector is here, they're getting all of the money and they're throwing it out through illicit financial flows. So it's like so obscene, and this is why people should hear about the complexities of that. And that to start a debate amongst ourselves, I also wanted to say some organizations are calling for debt relief, including the World Bank and the IMF. And this comes to mind with Lidi, because Lidi, whenever she's in a call, and some organizations are saying, yes, we should call for debt relief, and we're concerned about debt relief, and Lidi says, debt cancellation. What is the difference between those? Anybody who wants to jump in on this?
Let me try.
Yes.
Debt relief means you are just going to stop paying your debts for a time. No, it's like you suspend your debt payments. That's one form of debt relief, yeah? But when you say debt cancellation, it is written off, wipe out. Yeah? And that is
And then
why
also, like for me, yeah,
that's
go
why
ahead, go
there's
ahead.
a
Tete.
huge,
I
huge
get fired up.
difference between, just suspending or prolonging the time when you have to keep paying your debt and writing it off completely.
Exactly. And then I felt that that relief is like the pardon, they actually being nice of giving the relief, while actually when we said debt cancellation, we don't owe, so we won't pay, like that. It was like really, I really think it's also the mindset of it, like whether that it is debt relief or debt cancellation, right? Yeah. What do you think, Amelia?
No, yes, totally. And actually, it's also about recognizing that the historical debt and the real debt that rich countries have with their poorer countries is like you cause the environmental emergency, including pollution, biodiversity crisis, climate change, plastic pollution, chemicals, illicit financial flows, everything. So the least you can do is just let us off the hook and let us do our life and increase our policy space, and meaning increasing the fiscal floors, meaning increasing the way in which we can have our money, our sovereign money, and spend it in the way we want. We don't need anybody coming to tell us how is it that we need to spend the money, and even less to say that it's just because you're, as your Tete was saying, you're bad managers. It's like it's I just can't. So yeah, that's the difference between relief and cancellation.
But you know what's really ironic nowadays? People say we're in pandemic, and so the IMF and the World Bank says, okay, we're so kind, we're so good, we are going to institute a debt service suspension initiative. Now that's what Rina is saying, to make them look good, that they're actually helping out those countries struggling from paying their debts. So the IMF says, okay, let's suspend debt payments so that you can have the money to buy vaccines, because they're not for free and they're controlled by the big pharmaceuticals, and continue, providing for your people. So because we're so good and we understand the situation, you can just pay off your loans by end of December 2021. Maybe by that time you're already doing good, no? Maybe you've recovered already by end 2021. But it's not the case. No, because countries are already drowning in debt long before the pandemic. And so now with, the lockdowns, no economic activities, there's no money for them, no, there's no resources that the governments can use to provide for its people and to continue functioning. That's why they're forced to take out more loans. So the IMF has another solution. It says, okay, there are excess unused special drawing rights. Now SDR is the IMF currency. Now it's based on gold, right? So now they're saying, okay, because this is an emergency situation, we're going to use our reserves. But then the allocation of these reserves are still mind-boggling, because rich countries, because they have deposited much, much more to the IMF, they get so much more of those unused special drawing rights. And countries who needed them much, much more in the first place only got very, very little of those SDRs. But here's the thing. Wait, there's more. The rich countries are now going to recycle all of their unused SDRs as loans to poor countries. So
Tete, tell us what are SDRs.
SDRs are the special drawing rights. It's like the IMF money. So to have the SDRs, all member countries make a contribution to finance the IMF. That's their capital stock in effect, no? So it's just there in the vaults as a buffer. But now there's a need to pull out that buffer reserves, and the ironic thing is the rich countries who have contributed more are actually getting much, much more of those SDRs, which they now recycle as loans, and they will profit from it again. Boom.
I'm just
What is the
going to deep.
logic of that? I just don't understand. I don't understand what's the logic of it. Like SDR buffer money, and then it's not going to those who are needed, but actually going to the rich country for them to give more debt to the poor countries. Yeah, I'm sorry. I cannot understand totally that. Yeah, it's really bad. Amelia, you want to
I
say
just
something?
I just wanted to rant against the Bretton Woods, the World Bank, and the IMF because, also a couple of weeks ago there was this scandal about the doing business report, because they are ranking, the World Bank is ranking countries about which country is better to invest and stuff. And by doing this ranking with very flawed methodologies, they're actually leaning in leading the investors into the worst practices of precisely which one is going to make you pay the less taxes, which one has the flawed legislations on environment and stuff and stuff, and leading investors in investing on those by saying these are the most suitable places to invest. But also, by doing that, they're actually, artificially shaping the face of the countries, because now they're saying don't go here, go here. And again, they're leading everybody to support the economies of the richer countries while dismissing all of the poorest countries. But it turns out as well that with this report, there were a lot of bribes into changing the rankings of countries. So there were bribings from China, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Azerbaijan. So, but this is all the countries that we know, but it's really about what is happening there. And now, of course, the World Bank is saying, oh no, because we realize we've done a lot of damage, so we're going to withdraw our report. And now everybody's asking questions about why is the World Bank not working with ethics in the manner of really responding to the needs of the world. And in the World Bank, they're saying, oh, it's just, the responsibility is just on one single individual, Kristalina Georgieva, who was leading the World Bank. And it's like, and civil society is now super, super upset with this, because it's like, it's not, you cannot put the responsibility on a single individual. Whilst this report has been going on for so many years, you need to do a thorough review, an internal review, in accountability, in transparency, but really to undergo through the human rights framework and responding to gender equality, to environmental integrity, and really not profiting for the well-being of sustainable development rather than growth. All of those things, and so this is a debate happening now this week, because we are having also the annual sessions with the World Bank and the IMF. And so civil society is confronting all of this lack of responses and the huge profiting from those entities that are meant to be there to support the countries in this emergency. They're just not doing it at all. I'm sorry, I'm ranting against the World Bank and the IMF, but this is all totally related. Don't, Reina, you're muted.
No, I'm trying to see like what is. No, no, I'm just wanna see what I just wanna tell you that it is true, and then I think that a lot of civil society now is actually working on that. Using that doing business report scandal to actually expose the World Bank, and then how we actually just want to say that it's just a tip of an iceberg, right? So it's just the doing business report as that is not ethical, and then even the World Bank see it, is actually just a tip of the big huge flaw of the institution. So I totally agree, and I think again that all of this we need to expose, name and shame this kind of institution. Yeah, I just remember like our Bali. Were you there, Tetet, in Bali for our against World Bank? And it's
Of
just last year,
course.
October.
Almost got arrested.
You need to adopt
Almost
me
get
and take me to
arrested, right?
Asia.
That's right.
Yeah, it's good that Rina is talking about all of those
Mobilization.
protests during these high level meetings, because we already have a very rich history of the global debt movement. Of course, you might say again, were you born already at that time?
It was
I knew you
2012.
had mind. No, but we know that the debt problem is nothing. It's not the first time. Yeah, that the world is experiencing so much indebtedness and so many problems, and of course so many protests from people, because as governments still faithfully service the foreign debt, the budget that is supposed to be meant for providing for people's well-being, no, social services, health, education, these are the ones that are getting slashed, because the IMF, the World Bank, the creditors, they all want us to tighten the belts, no, austerity measures, so that countries will be able to repay their loans by cutting down on social spending. It's like, okay, Rina, I know it doesn't make sense, but that's what they do. They impose a lot of these austerity measures. And of course, when people get kicked off from their jobs, if people don't have food on their table, of course, people will get angry. Yeah? Hungry people are angry people, and there's been a lot of protests globally, no, from Latin America to Africa to Asia in the 1980s. Now that's why, as a result of those protests, there's been some reforms. No, there's been some reforms in the way these institutions administer their conditionalities. It doesn't mean reforming so that, they will be good and altruistic. They just wanted to shield themselves from so much pressure. Yeah, and making over themselves that they are now responsive, environment friendly, gender. Oh, I love the creditors are always playing the gender card, not to say that they're socially responsible creditors. Emilia.
No, yes, I'm just nodding. In a way, I'm having fun because I always laugh at all the absurd things, but I'm also suffering deep inside because of everything that it's related. But as you were saying, I think this session today should honor, as you are both saying, the movement behind in making visible this issue, because economy is always meant to it's always presented for people as it's so technical, nobody can talk about this but the real experts, so you don't understand. And if you have debt in your debit card or your credit card, then you're all the worse. You really don't know how to manage, so don't mess with these issues that are really serious, and then the movements around the 80s, they explained why, for instance, in Latin America, it's called the lost decade, precisely because of the restructurations that we went through. That is precisely this. The mandates of the World Bank and the IMF in saying you need to restructure your entire economy, stop spending on social issues, and start spending on supposedly what is going to drive the economy. But people is the material uh, force that drives everything. It's like so stupid to think of sectors without people. And this is why all of this logic of those economists, orthodox economists, is so flawed. But then what they're doing is to say, to hide it under technocrat language. And all of these movements in the 80s up to now, they're unpacking all of this technical language. So for all of the audience out there who are, by the way, really quiet today, so please engage with us and tell us what you're doing in this week of debt, or what are you going to do after understanding more of this. Let us know. But then this is really about a knowledge that everybody can have just by understanding the inequalities and the unfairness of it all. And so honoring these movements is really important. So we talked also about the protest in the UN on the debt workout mechanism. Why is it that we need a global mechanism? Lina leading on the choreo, but also now for the COP, towards the COP in climate change in Glasgow, there is not this is not an item in the agenda, so it's not that governments are going to talk about this, but we are really saying that we need to talk about debt and climate change because it's totally interrelated. There will not be any climate justice without debt justice. Tete, Orina, anybody wants to chime in on this and enlighten us with your knowledge?
Let's all get confused together. Yeah,
Okay.
I think there's really that connection, because as I've been saying earlier, when developing countries are so cash strapped, no, they don't have enough resources. They get to prioritize spending on infrastructure, on energy, because that's what's going to drive the economy. Meantime, really ignoring setting aside social services, social protection, which people need, especially when climate impacts hit them. When disasters strike, of course, my house is washed away by the flood, our fields, all your crops are destroyed. You would look to your government for social protection, in terms of rehabilitation, rebuilding, repair. But there's no resources because our countries are still paying off their debt, and because it's a conditionality that government should cap their spending to this level for social protection. So of course, people who are already facing the worst impacts of the climate crisis do not have any mechanism by which the government can give support to them in those very difficult times. So that is another layer of injustice, to questioning why are we vulnerable to climate impacts in the first place, because of extractive industries, because
Yeah.
our our fields have been leveled off, our mountains have been leveled off because of mining to establish high rise hotels and condominiums, according to the logic of IMF, the neoliberal development logic. For countries like ours, we have to open up our economy to foreign investors, etc. And of course, they just want to, suck away all our resources for their benefits. And that is what Emilia is saying, no, that those transfers, actually, who is helping who is developing who? It's really Africa, Asia, Latin America developing, making rich northern companies and northern corporations. So that is why you cannot separate, all of these issues around debt justice, climate justice, trade justice, gender justice.
And distributive justice also. Now, I'm also want to chip in on the climate debt, right? Like for instance, they're saying that we actually owe them, right? But no, I think that what is actually that have been said by a lot of debt movement and also like the climate movement is not, and also like the environmental movement. We always said that there's a environmental debt and climate debt because it's actually the developed country, the rich countries, they owe us, yeah, the developing countries, for all the damage caused by their large contribution to climate change, their large contribution to also environmental degradation and destruction. Why can't we actually, try to count, how much is it, right? And then ask for them to actually pay. So this is why like a lot of the debt movement is also very, very strong about this climate debt. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's really important also to have these dialogues with the environmental movement, because there's a not all of them, but many people are saying, yeah, plant a tree, or I don't know. It's like I don't, you, you know, get your bamboo toothbrush, or stop using straws, which is fine, but it's like really we need to start engaging with this economic issues, and it's not really not that difficult,
Yeah.
as I was saying, but getting the bigger picture and the fuller picture will help us move from demanding the 100 billions, and in the funding of the 100 billions. Because I'm saying this because people is now actually calling for the 100 billions committed in Copenhagen for climate response, as if it were just one figure, and that was meant for be to be yearly. So that is one stuff, and people keep on demanding we want the 100 billions, and it's like that was like I think of the past, and we still haven't gotten there. We have only 87 thousand, and not the 100. We have never achieved that anyway. But then demanding that without realizing that there is so much happening even at the national level, like discussing the NDCs, the national determined contributions, that are the commitments that every country has to in reducing their emissions, but also adapting, without really making a connection with the fiscal policies. Without, are we indebted? Are we taxing the rich or not? Are we divesting from spending on social sectors, etc.? There is not that equation, and environmentalists are not making that equation either. So they're just going asking for a meaningless figure at the COP, at the Green Climate Fund, and it's like people stop asking for the price of this pen in comparison to what is really going on in the $11 million that are going in subsidies in fossil fuels every minute. Every minute. Lydia's here.
Yay!
Lady is
Sorry, I'm
here.
late.
Lady is here. Lady
Woo!
is here.
Welcome!
I think I got the time wrong because
Lady. Hi.
can you hear me?
Yes!
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I was looking at your earlier email, Emilia, and it says 10 a.m. New York, so that's 10 p.m. Philippines. So I thought it wasn't gonna start yet. so and then I
Oh,
saw
apologies. Them are more to blame, missing on our legend leading Nactil in this webinar.
oh,
Sorry for that. Now we've been saying how amazing you are, Lydie, and you've been doing this amazing work, especially for this week.
Yes.
Tell,
Yes.
tell us in this time that is coming now. Tell us what is happening this week.
okay, so wow, a
Well,
lot
first,
of
first, first, first of all, tell us about you. Sorry to interrupt. Tell us about you, who you
ah,
are,
gosh.
please.
So I'm from the Philippines, like Tetet here. I have been an activist for, oh, this is going to reveal my age, more than 40 years since I was a student in the university, working on many issues. And after 40 years, I'm still doing the same thing, rallying on the streets. We have an action tomorrow, by the way, at the front of the World Bank building. And, protesting. And yeah, pretty much. Only I'm not doing it just in the Philippines now. Like the world is our stage because all of our issues are global, not just they're local and national, but also global. So we really need to work together in the global arenas. So that's what I do. I'm a feminist, an activist, a socialist. What else should I say? So,
Well, tell us about what is happening this week. And it's
okay.
my fault. We're gonna invite you again so that people can have the pleasure of hearing you for a full hour. But tell us what is happening this week.
Okay. So this week is part of this very intensive period since September for many issues, on the debt front, we know that there's several major events taking place that where decisions and non-decisions will be made. that will affect the issue of the debt and have an effect on the many demands we're making. But many of these are the same arenas where we're facing these huge challenges on the tax front. We're fighting a deal that the OECD, the G20, and the G7 are making that will make our lives worse because they're favoring multinationals and elites. And now there's also COP26 coming, so a lot of climate issues needs to be highlighted because of the urgency. But we have declared, together with all of you and many of us, global days of action for justice and debt cancellation, which actually begins tomorrow. Tomorrow. We're not calling it a week because this time around it's going to be actually 15, 16 days. So it's stretching from the time of the IMF and World Bank meetings, which are taking place right now. Hence the action tomorrow in front of the World Bank offices. It's happening in several cities in Asia, also in Washington, D.C., I believe. They have an action plan, and also in Europe, some cities in Europe. Um, and it stretches all the way to the G20 summit on the 30th and 31st. It's covering a number of other events. Tomorrow is also Thomas Sankara death anniversary, an African president who was assassinated, but he was really a major champion for debt repudiation. Probably way before many of our audience were born. And then also we have in this coming days the Finance in Common Summit for many of the like 400 public financial institutions, and some of them are the biggest creditors, no, are going to come together. That's their second summit. So all of these events are happening, and they're moments for us to really raise our voices in our countries and globally, because these are major institutions, governments, and corporations that are affecting our lives. So we need to really make noise and make them feel people's cries for changes, demands for changes in the many forums that are still available to us during this COVID time. So we continue also to push the barriers. So, for instance, as Tetet knows, in Manila, we're not supposed to be doing protest actions, but we try to the extent that we can. So tomorrow we are going to have this action in front of the World Bank, and next week we're going to have bike actions for climate. Yes, we can tell you about that later because I've been talking
Yeah.
too much. Let me
No, I'm
back to
thinking
you.
I'm thinking that since this is gonna last 15 days, maybe Lily, maybe we can invite you for our next session in 15 days, so
Yes.
you can tell us how it went, and you can
Mhm.
tell us a bit more, because I'm super ashamed of my mistake, and really missing the opportunity of the audience to listen to you. But yes, tell us, why is it so important? Why it's global? Why that? Why now?
Well, the debt issue is something many of us have been working on for many years, because it's both a symptom as well as a factor for the huge problems which have been exacerbated further by this COVID pandemic, that many people in the global south are suffering, like poverty, um, marginalization, and that, as we all know, hits women especially harder. Is very much linked to the climate issue, because not only does the debt problem make our people even more vulnerable, debt is being used as an instrument for false solutions to the climate. We've been demanding climate finance, and 2/3 of climate finance flows have been in the form of debt. So, what good will climate finance do if at the cost of that is our people will be burdened with even more debt? And it's completely contrary to the principle of climate finance as reparations for all the wrongs that have been done to us. And they're going to make us pay for these reparations, because they're saying, here you are, we're lending you the money to solve the problems that we caused you, and then you have to pay us back with interest, no? So this is and the situation of the multiple crisis, COVID, and the climate and the economic crisis is really highlighting the urgency that we really need to address this problem and solve it once and for all. So we're no longer accepting these little bits of crumbs that governments are giving us, like the debt suspension initiative or the few months of debt payment suspension that the IMF is giving. And so we're taking this opportunity to once again raise the many structural issues and causes of debt. And we need to be heard, as some people are saying, but we need to be practical. What are some of the immediate solutions? We're not saying that we don't want the immediate steps. No, our people need relief, whatever relief can be done, but it cannot be at the expense of shutting our mouths about the real causes. No, so even as we make some immediate demands, we need to take this opportunity, and this is the moment in the next 2 weeks when many governments and institutions are gathering, that we need to make our voices heard much more strongly than before. Um, we don't campaign on the basis of occasions, no? Red letter days, we do this. Campaigning is a year round thing, but there are special moments like this when we need to make really strong push and make our voices even louder, because these are moments when people's attention, especially media attention or government's attention, uh, is easy to catch on these issues because of these events. You know how media is fond of events. They hear you better if they can link it to some international event. So that's why it's that, and it's this moment, but it's not just that, it's also climate, it's also energy and tax and many other things. That's the thing I think all four of us know, no, in the South. uh, you're not just a debt activist or a climate activist or a tax activist. Our movements have to fight in all of these fronts. So I don't know if you can categorize ourselves as, we can't split our bodies and say, well, this part of me is working on debt. And so, yeah.
Exactly. And the UN has been so unprepared for the level of the challenges, and as you say, they're splitting up the content and the discussions, and they're refusing to really address everything in an intergovernmental space. So they're really giving it up to the rich countries, in this case the G7, the G20, the OECD, or are you saying that this rich the pets of the rich countries like the World Bank and the IMF, but also the Paris Club, which is the supposedly solving body, but it's really made out of the lenders. So they're really doing everything for their benefits, and there is no really like a global solution. So tell us about what are the solutions we are all proposing. Those are practical solutions, and I don't know why people call us idealistics, but we have solutions. So tell us a bit about those solutions.
Well, what I'm going to say are steps towards really the structural changes. The solutions are really changing the system, no? That's how you're going to solve it. A complete change of the system. But we need to be able to identify what are some of the immediate steps that we need to compel governments to do and institutions to do in order to pave the way so that we can, fight for bigger changes. Of course, one immediate demand that we have is still to cancel debts. Not, it's not. It's a partial step, because you don't solve the debt problem by simply canceling the debts, because as we all know from previous debt cancellation initiatives, they just reaccumulate. No, so those who were beneficiaries to the debt relief in 1999, 2000, and then another round of debt relief in 2005, these are now the very countries that are also threatened with new debt distress. As we said before, and these are, the times when we hate to be right. As we had said then, this debt relief were just designed to clean up the books of this country so that they can borrow again, which they did. And now they're back to the same problem. So we need debt cancellation to give us immediate relief, but we need to use that space in order to start transforming the structures that are leading us to this cycle of at least for the southern countries, it's a cycle of borrowing in order to pay debts. But we also need to challenge the lenders so that we are not subject to a situation where actually it's a lot of loan pushing. No, I mean, they like to paint this picture that it's our countries that are desperately in need of cash because we have liquidity crisis or insolvency and all this stuff, but their need to lend and make money on their lending and use lending as a way to create conditions that will be more to their interests, to their economic interests and benefits is, I think, far greater. No, because we have so many cases where it's really the lenders that have been pushing, making it easy for credit access in order to push out these loans because together with it they have some other interest in mind. And that's largely the story of this whole history of this whole debt problem and debt crisis. So we need to cancel the debts, but we need to review the practices and policies of lending and borrowing and to challenge those with some immediate changes in those practices. But we need to use the space that we create in order to start compelling our governments in the South to start transforming our systems. Because without that, I mean, we need to get at the roots of why is it that we have such bounty of natural resources, extremely hardworking people and women especially. We create the wealth, but there's actually a net resource outflow from the south to the north. So it's not that we're not able to create wealth. We create the wealth for our people from our labor, from our resources, but we don't retain it in our countries. The biggest lie that they tell us is that the North is giving money to the South, supporting us, aiding us. The amount of aid and lending and investments is by far much smaller than the value of resources that they're extracting from us, including from our labor. And now it's not just our labor in our countries, it's our labor in their countries because of our millions of migrant workers from our countries. And so that's why we need to change our economies in the end. There's no other way to solve the debt problem. But some other immediate is that we need to create democratic forums where there is a discussion around these issues around the debt, addressing debt, both as unsustainable debt and illegitimate debt. May I just insert that in the picture? It's not just about debt that we cannot pay. It's about debt that we should not pay, no matter
Yeah.
but if we can afford it, because it's not just. It's not justice if we start paying these debts. Um, we need this space where this can be discussed by governments, by civil society that are not creditor dominated or lender dominated. So within the UN spaces, for a long time, we've been talking about a democratic, accountable global mechanism to address the problem of sovereign debt in all its aspects. You can find various, formulations of this demand, but those are some of those things that we have been calling for. I don't know if that will ever be created in the immediate or medium term future, but certainly raising this demand helps us expose what is currently happening, no? Where the solutions for the debt problem are in spaces that are dominated by the creators of this problem. So of course, the solutions that are being promoted are to their benefit, no? To their
Yeah.
benefit. False solutions in climate, there's also false solutions in debt. And I'm talking too much.
Exactly.
No,
Interesting.
Lily, we are running out of time, but we are committing to bringing you next in the next session, which is in 15 days. But really, maybe we can think about this issue that you brought up about the reparations. About how because people maybe need to think about it from another angle, which is the same thing, but we're trying to explain the audience in many ways how these technical terms are really about shifting the system, impacting in a better way, the solutions for the people and the planet. Maybe in next sessions, you can tell us about what happened, and we will be
Yeah.
following you in your networks, and the campaign of campaigns will be uh, also sharing all of the contents of these days of global action. But also maybe we can also think about how to engage people, regular people. How is it that people can say, this matter concerns me, this is not something that only experts can do. So maybe we can talk about this in this next session. uh,
And
yeah,
Lily
Teta
can
Rosvina.
dance with
Ah,
us.
Yes.
What?
We don't have time to dance today, but let
we
us
don't have
dance
time.
next week
We have
together.
activism.
Okay.
Let's
Yay!
chant
To the
next
music.
time.
We're committing Lily to dance with us next session.
Lady, we're going to chant again.
Yeah.
Okay, people. So
Are
thank you
we
so much.
okay?
Yeah, we need to close now, but thank you so much. And we're going to be back
Thank
with
you,
you and Lily
everyone.
in 15 days.